ultimately, in every case, no matter what kind of case it is, a jury is finding a fact, which really just means there's two people with their own version of facts, and the jury is going to decide which one they believe more than the other. And ultimately, that's a credibility decision. So anytime in the practice you have a client who is going to be impeached, you've got a major problem. If you get impeached on the witness stand, you're toast. You're never going to win. Welcome to Above the Legal Limit. I'm your host, Justin Chopin, business owner, lawyer, dad, world's best husband, traveler, and adventure seeker. On this podcast, we mix business with pleasure. We'll dive into growth strategies, entrepreneurial adventures, the business of law, and prove that business isn't boring. So let's get ready because we are going above the legal limit. Welcome to another episode of Above the Legal Limit. I have here a return guest. Now, this is a big deal. We've never had a return guest before.
I'm honored.
That's actually not true. We've actually had return guests twice.
Oh.
Sorry, but
Still
you're
honored.
only the third return guest we've ever had. And so we have a return guest, Shoshana Cohen. Thank you for coming back on. So as you recall, where we left off last, you were enlightening me about the JonBenet Ramsey trial or investigation or whatever it is. I'm some Netflix series. Look, I run ragged. I have to run this little operation, and then I got two kids who are just abusive towards me for my time and energy. I get no thanks whatsoever. But it's not like Donald Trump. I get no thanks. That's okay. So I don't know. I don't always know what's up, right? So I didn't know JonBenet Ramsey was a thing again, and everyone was like, "Justin, you're an idiot." So I was like, "Okay, put it on my tab." So this time, once again, I got informed, "Justin, you're an idiot. What do you mean you're not following the Menendez brothers?" And I said, the Menendez brothers from the 90s, the guys, were they in California? Who went to prison for murdering their father? Did it both their parents? Both parents. And everyone resoundingly back, in the office said yes. And then they said some more insulting things to me. So here we are. Shoshana is going to educate me on the all things Menendez. Where do we even start?
So let's start because we do have some context now that we had our previous podcast on JonBenet Ramsey. I think the most important thing to distinguish here is there's no question whatsoever that these two boys killed their parents. So we don't have to sit here and solve the mystery. We know. The biggest mystery in the case in itself is almost how the case is handled. Not necessarily that anyone did anything wrong, but just, can you argue that this case was self-defense? Given that there was no direct harm to them.
Let's back up. Quick question. They killed the mom too?
They did. And that is something that I think people ask the most is why the mom too?
Yeah, why they kill the mom? A lot of guys want to kill their dads. You can't just go around killing moms.
They describe the mother as an alcoholic who abused them and let it happen.
Okay.
I will say days leading up to the murder, there was... again, everything I'm talking about, the two parents are dead. So, all
True.
we have is the testimony of these two men now who they did not necessarily have a very honest track record going through. There was a lot of falsifying evidence, falsifying attempts to do so that were caught by the court. It is just important to say that by the second trial, only one brother testified because of some attempts to just falsify some testimonies.
Well, all right. So let's back up one more time, and then we're going to talk about falsifying evidence and testimony at trial. But why are we talking about this now? Why is this relevant in 2025? When did the murder take place?
The August 20th, 1989.
You're so prepared.
In Beverly Hills.
So prepared. It's amazing. August 1989.
1989.
Where were you in August of 1989?
I was not born yet,
Wow.
2000s baby. But
All right.
I will say the Menendez
baby.
family, just to give you a little bit of background, moved to Beverly Hills from, I don't actually know where Florida? No, they were actually going to move to Florida. After the murders, there was a plan for Jose Menendez wanted to move his entire family to Florida for his job. He was a huge music record producer. He was big in that industry, which will come up later in the new evidence that has evolved. But they moved in 1986 for his job in Los Angeles.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's interesting. So why are we talking about it now?
Recently, this past Tuesday, the Menendez brothers were resentenced to what was previously. I actually do think it's important to just go over what they were charged with initially.
Okay.
So on March 20th, 1996, a second jury convinced.
7 years.
Yes. Now I could talk about. So there was an initial first trial. This first trial, they were tried. The brothers were tried separately. 2 separate juries. Both juries hung. Could not reach a unanimous decision whatsoever.
Okay.
So then the second trial comes around, tried together, and they are charged.
Any information as to why the change in strategy of trying them separately versus together?
I did mention the falsifying, there was the whole falsifying some witness testimony. I think potentially that could have, you would know, but like maybe that could have been a way of avoiding
here's the problem.
Him going on the stand.
Ultimately, in every case, no matter what kind of case it is, it could be a commercial case, it could be a murder case, it could be a personal injury case, a jury is finding a fact, which really just means there's 2 people with their own version of facts, and the jury is going to decide which one they believe more than the other. And ultimately, that's a credibility decision. Mm-hmm. So anytime in the practice you have a client who is going to be impeached, you've got a major problem. I mean, if you get impeached on the witness stand, you're toast. You're never going to win. Because, right, what are they doing? They're finding who's more believable, the guy who lied or, this other person who hasn't lied. But every time it's going to be the guy who's not lying. So if he's falsifying evidence, then that might be the reason. It's just strategy. It's like, well, we can't put him on the witness stand because the second he's on the witness stand, they're going to say, but you testified here as to this. And, and I mean, it's over.
So that's key here is the fact that prosecution's whole claim here is that the brothers are liars. The first thing that they did was play the 911 call. The 911 call of the brothers. They shot, my parents have been shot. This whole dramatic scene. 18 and 21.
Okay.
Lyle is the older brother. Eric is 18.
Gotcha.
He was looking at colleges about 3 days before August 17th. His dad and him were talking about how he was going to need to stay home a little bit more for his first semester and for a while, which is when he claims he was concerned that the abuse was going to start again. That's when he then tells his brother the abuse has been still going on since he was 6 years old. Till he was 18 years old. And then the older brother Lyle confronts the dad, says he will go to the police and tell the truth about what happened unless he stops putting his hands on his brother. That obviously elicits a very poor reaction from the father. According to Eric, he runs to his room, does not lock the door. The dad chases after him. He manages to escape his room, go downstairs to where his mom is sitting. His mom is like, what is wrong? Like, what is wrong with you? And he says, you wouldn't understand. And she says, I've known this whole time. I understand. And that is really what launches this entire thing. Also, just a fun fact people like to talk about, Lyle Menendez, the older brother, had a toupee on his head. And about a week before the murder, the mom ripped the toupee off of his head in an argument to demonstrate, to embarrass him in front of the other brother. So the other brother had no idea.
Wait, he was 21 and he was bald?
Mm-hmm.
It's weird.
And really insecure about it.
Apparently.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, okay.
It just kind of shows their that was just very relevant to Lyle. That's sort of the only Eric, he has several forensic psychologists, different doctors. They diagnose him with battered persons disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. Then you obviously have some people on the prosecution side that say there's nothing wrong with him. He just has anxiety, and anxiety disorder wouldn't influence his decision. But the only time you sort of see a vulnerable side of Lyle, on the other hand, is with this hair piece.
When he's got no hair.
Yeah.
Hey, I get it. Like, my hair, second I turned 30, was gone, hey, whatever. But, so are they claiming this is self-defense?
This I want to read to you because it is actually from the first trial. And it's from Leslie Abramson, who is their defense attorney, who I think, like, I have so much respect for this defense attorney. I think she is one of the most incredible people out there. I think it's that piece of paper that's on the ground over there, actually.
Good. Cool.
But basically, their whole claim is that they have no intent of trying to excuse anybody from killing their abuser. They're not at all saying that they are in the
because that's the
right.
problem, right?
Yeah.
So in the law, when we talk about self-defense, you often have to look and say, well, what are the circumstances, immediate circumstances, such that lethal action would be warranted? Is it he was coming after me with a knife, right? Is it he had his hand in his pocket and I thought he had a gun? Is it he made threatening motions and then turned around and was walking away? And so the case law is replete. Like every imagined scenario that you can think of in a self-defense world has already been ruled and decided on. And by and large, there's a trend. And you see the trend is, look, it's got to be some immediate harm, true self-defense, which is why in these scenarios, in these abuse scenarios, it's hard sometimes to say, well, did you have to kill them? Did you have to shoot them? Could you just I don't know, leave? You're 18 and 21. Did they have a car?
I could tell you they got brand new cars after.
Well, okay, so if they got brand new ones, maybe they had old ones. I mean, you don't have to stay, and I understand. So if anyone out there has been a victim of abuse, you may be saying, Justin, that's a very cold take. And sometimes in the law, we are cold. Sometimes under the law, we have to be, because we have to set sort of a standard that may not contemplate every variable. But I mean, you don't always have to kill. Sometimes, hey, you can maim, right? You could I'm kidding, but I mean, you could always leave. Mm-hmm. So there. All right. So what's this new evidence? So why are we talking? Now we're talking about this old cold case, and they want to resentence based on what?
So there was prior not enough evidence for them even to have all 50 witnesses that they had in the first trial to even discuss the abuse, because there was not enough evidence to back it up. They just wanted to sort of leave as much of it as they could out of the trial.
So in the original trial, abuse was not an issue.
The second trial, because the first trial hung jury, they were given all of the information and the jury couldn't come to a decision.
Well, if they had the information in the first trial, why wouldn't the defense present it in the second trial?
That was the move, and that was this whole petition I was showing you earlier, was that they eliminated the opportunity for self-defense to be an option. They did stand by their decision to decrease the number of witnesses, and I will say that let's get into the new evidence, because the new evidence actually, so the first new evidence is a letter written from Eric Menendez to his cousin, Andy Cano. Andy Cano testified in the first trial. If you go back and you watch the first trial footage, he is Andy Cano testifying that Eric had told him about the abuse when they were younger. He's butchered alive on the stand. I mean, made out to be a liar. I saw it. I was like, wow, he's lying. You really. Then years later, the Menendez family has stayed by their side the entire time. Sister of Jose Menendez, by the Menendez brothers' side this whole time.
That's the aunt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She ends up finding a letter, maybe less than 5 years ago, not very long ago, with a letter from Eric to the brother. It's not dated, it's not stamped, but the details in it, describing events coming up, describing what had just happened, sets the time frame enough that it was sufficient evidence to show. He talks about, my dad came in my room last night. I can't keep doing this. Just talking about the abuse that he's suffering at the hands of his father. That is one piece of new evidence. The second evidence was Roy Rossello, a member of the, I think the band was called Menudo.
Menudo, sure.
Yeah, Menudo. Sure. He comes out and accuses, he accuses Jose Menendez years later of.
Isn't menudo a soup with tripe? I've always been curious about that. Anyways, go on.
He accuses him of similar claims of allegations of sexual abuse.
Okay.
The prosecution argues, that didn't affect them during the murder. This has no effect on their mindset, their frame of mind at the time of the murder. No pieces of evidence affect that. But it was enough for them to consider resentencing.
Okay. So, one thing that I think is an overarching theme here is a shift in cultural values and cultural perception. So 30 years ago or 40 years ago, maybe we didn't talk about these kinds of things. Maybe it wasn't understood that, I bet the father was abusing them. I think we live in sort of a new cultural phenomenon, a state of phenomenon where it's like when a woman dies, you automatically assume it's the fiance. Like everyone's like, it's the husband, right? When a child kills a parent, you automatically assume, I bet they were abused. And in a lot of ways, I think Americans root for the charge. I think we root for the anti-hero or the criminal, or we always, movies are often, taking the criminal and presenting them in their best light. I mean, like, hey, you look at Shawshank, right? And some of like the best characters there. Like, there's no question that, with the exception of the main character, there's no question that these people were criminals. But you root for them. You want the best for them. I think that's where we are in 2025. And so it wouldn't surprise me that looking back on it, people think, in this day and age, we've seen so much abuse, the church abuse, right? Schools abusing, parents abusing, and maybe we didn't talk about it back then, but we're talking about it now. Do you think that sort of plays into why a court wouldn't be open to this discussion?
Yeah, I talked about Leslie Abramson a little bit, but I remember this one line she said, I think it was her closing statements of the second trial, and she just said, I'm asking you, she looks at the jury and she said, would you be treating my client any differently if his name was Erica Menendez? That was powerful, because I think I look back to our conversation about JonBenet Ramsey, and it was so easy to go for the parents. They must have been abusing her the whole time, right? Why don't we have that same instinct about these pretty, they were larger built men. They were men now at the time, at least Lyle, legally an adult.
18. I'm like 18 years old. You're an adult male. You can vote and be drafted, and interesting. So, have we resentenced? And what's the decision?
They've resentenced 50 years. 50 years with eligibility of parole. They've been in prison now for 35 years. Oh. They were recently, so
it's not a get out. They didn't get out ticket, get out of jail ticket. So now what? That really places the decision in someone else's hands. Mm-hmm. So the court just puts it on the parole board, and it's like, maybe you guys decide this. I don't want to.
Yeah, which is another interesting thing that I was looking at things to discuss with you about, and I was thinking about, it's interesting that the jury made the initial decision, and then what the difference is sort of arguing your case to a judge versus arguing your case to a jury. Is there a difference in how you prepare for those two things?
Sure, yeah. So look, I've often said that judges can be just as influenced as jurors can. There's the old sort of saying that like the average reading level of a juror is that of and they would always say something, I don't know, like third grader. I don't think that that's really true anymore. And judges are obviously more educated. Most of them are lawyers, depending on where you are. Some of them are appointed, some of them are elected, but they're people, and they're just as susceptible to bias as anybody else, you and me included. Mm-hmm. But you do prepare differently. This is a hot issue right now. It's about to come up. They're just talking about it in local news, where there's a New Orleans criminal judge who was elected, and everybody before her is opting for a judge trial instead of a jury trial, and they're all getting acquitted. And this judge is accounting for the vast majority of the judge trials on that bench. And so everyone's saying, well, wait a second. Hold on, how do we feel about this? The article was talking about how, you knew she was progressive. Now, is that the best for the city of New Orleans? Probably not. got a lot of problems around here. I don't know, got a lot of crime issues. So the way you would prepare for a judge might be very differently the way you prepare for a jury. I'll tell you, in our world, the way you prepare for a bench trial is going to be very differently than the way that you prepare for a jury trial. Mm-hmm. But how do you prepare for a parole board? Who's sitting on the parole board? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will say I do know that I don't know how parole boards work, but I will say they've done a lot of good things in prison, started a lot of good programs.
See, I saw some headlines that saying they didn't do such good things in prison.
I know there was something about them stealing a phone.
Yeah, that they kind of got in trouble. There was
That's true, but I mean, I haven't seen anything violent.
I don't know how you could spend 4 years in prison and just carve chess pieces. I don't think that that's real life. Yeah. I think that's just Hollywood.
I mean, I also was thinking that we could potentially talk about how exactly do you rehabilitate after something like this? Because the other thing, and I didn't want to bring this up, but this is a trend right now. These cases of abuse coming out. We recently just had a New Orleans local who was a victim of Munchausen by proxy syndrome by her mother. When Katrina happened, she moved with her mother, and the mom claimed that all of the medical records were erased in Katrina. So when they moved to their new home, she made up all of these disorders and things wrong with her. She had all of these surgeries she didn't need, ended up getting her boyfriend to brutally stab her mom. She recently just got out of prison.
Well, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, see? But this just happened, and I had been going around the office, like I know the Menendez brothers are going to get resentenced, and that is the precedent. This case right here, her name's Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She's in Metairie.
Her name's Gypsy?
Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Okay. She's a Metairie local. Shout out to Metairie.
I grew up in Metairie, on the parish line.
But I think that her case really did set a precedent in this because she had a big following of people sort of watching, like she thinking, she was a victim of abuse. Yes, she was also the accomplice to a murder of her own mother, but she was a victim, and she recently just got out on parole and is almost, I think, finished with her parole.
What about the boyfriend? Where is he?
He's still in jail.
Yeah, that's why, if you're ever dating somebody and she asks you that important question, will you murder my mother? I would advise to say no. Yeah. Maybe try something else. Mm-hmm. Maybe, interesting.
But this is like a trend right now, is like they're going back on these like abuse cases, and I guess giving it a second look.
Is that an abuse case? Munchausen by proxy?
Yeah. I mean, so she was forced to be in a wheelchair. She did not know, she claims she did not know she did not have terminal cancer until she was in prison and got a checkup in prison. She knew she could walk. She obviously knew her legs worked.
Well, if she didn't know until she got into prison, then how is that the basis of a defense?
Because her mom was abusing her. I mean, she was sleeping every night with a CPAP machine. Or was it CPAP? First of all, she had to eat everything out of a feeding tube. Her mom told her she had to eat everything out of a feeding tube. I haven't done so much research on this.
We'll do that one next. I don't know.
It's next. And
I don't know about Gypsy.
I also kind of want to give her a chance to sort of figure herself out right now. She recently just had a baby. It's a whole, topic for another time. But that is very fresh, and it's here, and it's happening while we're here. But just what was interesting about that is that's the first case I had seen kind of where they were like, okay, you were abused. Let's consider that as a justification now that we're considering what to do with your
And I can't speak to the legality of abuse because I'm not that kind of lawyer. I'm not a criminal lawyer. So maybe some criminal guys can, DM me and tell me I'm an idiot. That's fine, But it is interesting. I mean, it certainly, if you're using a strict, and obviously keep in mind too, California criminal law and Louisiana criminal law they're going to be very different. We're both civilian style states, but they're going to be very different. So what you see in California isn't necessarily what you're going to see here. We deal with that a lot especially when you see like employment work. I don't do a lot of employment work anymore, but we used to. And they would say, well, I see, out of California, these verdicts for this, this, and this. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not in California. You're in the Fifth Circuit, baby. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're not going to get a verdict. You're going to get nothing because of where you're located. And I'm sorry for that, but that's the truth. It does seem to be a trend. Do you think that this is like a societal trend, or do you think are we soft on crime?
I mean, I was going to flip the question on you because I wanted to ask you kind of. I know, this is the celebrity sort of a level we're talking about.
I mean, celebrity crime, we love that,
yeah,
right?
But I feel like this is happening.
Drink enough of it.
This is happening anyway, right? Where we're going back and resentencing, looking at people's sentences, going back and making sure that it was fair. Isn't that something that's happening right now?
So what happened in Louisiana is we used to have non-unanimous jury verdicts for the death penalty. And we were only one of 2 states in the United States. It is a Jim Crow era law. And I think it was us and maybe Wyoming Washington. I think it's us and Washington. We're the only 2 states that allowed for the death penalty with a non-unanimous jury verdict. And I remember, I was on the House of Delegates when we voted on this issue as to the bar's position back when we could do that kind of stuff. We can't do it now. Now we just, we don't do anything. But, in those days we could vote on it. And the sentiment was, hey, yeah, the origins of this law are not something that we should be celebrating. These are Jim Crow era laws. No other state. We're not keeping any good company here, and we love to rag Mississippi and Alabama, and even they don't have this. So eventually, we wrote it out, and now you need a unanimous jury for the death penalty. So what do we do with the hundreds of men sentenced to death, rotting on death row with non-unanimous jury verdicts? And there was a Supreme Court case, and do we retry them all? Do we retry some? Do we just leave it? And there's a big debate.
Or just resentence.
Do we resentence? Then keep in mind too, technology is changing, and so what you're also seeing is a lot of new evidence coming out by way of DNA, and so tons of cases are getting retried because of DNA, and it is exonerating people who've spent a lot of their life in prison. Because now DNA evidence is suggesting, hey, maybe they weren't the killer. So it is an issue as technology improves, as new technologies come out, and as public sentiment changes. It's interesting. It's a little scary. I mean, I had a law school professor who once said, look, I'm not saying you got to give the guy a medal, right? He's not done anything honorable, but does it fit the charge? The Menendez brothers, I wouldn't be inviting them to any cocktail parties anytime soon. I still maintain, you didn't have to kill the mother. It sounded a little more calculated.
I don't think you can argue it wasn't premeditated. They planned, they went to a shooting range before, they bought the guns in advance.
Just practice?
You can't
practice the murder?
I think that in the court filings, it talks about how they went to this shooting range and someone said, if you want to hurt a person, you can't use this specific, I am not a gun person, I don't know anything, but you can't use this specific bullet or something like that. So they, completely shifted their plan. They knew these guns were going to be used in what they, I guess, thought would be self-defense, but that's clearly not an option here.
What kind of guns did they use?
Shotguns.
Oh, okay.
More than 12 shots were fired.
Okay.
And they reloaded. And the mom was still alive before they went the second time.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. 12 rounds from a shotgun. So most shotguns will hold, when you take the plug out, right, they'll hold 5 rounds. So they didn't just reload, they reloaded multiple times.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
Well, look, they spent 50 years, they were sentenced to 50 years?
Now, 50 years, yes.
What do you think is going to happen?
I'm kind of conflicted about the whole parole thing. I think they've to me, it makes a huge difference to them. That's the years they could be in prison, but they're getting out. That's where I'm at. I'm just they're getting out. It's just real.
Do you think they're going to get out? How old
Don't
are
they
now?
have to? I mean, they're either going to get out in 50 years or they're going to get out on parole.
Didn't you say they've only served 35 years?
Yeah, so they have.
Okay, 15 more years, man. How old are these
I
guys?
was just hoping for eternity for them, like hoping they'd make it, you know?
I don't know. They may not. They may not make it. So, I mean, if they were, all right, do the math, get your calculator out. All right, in 1989, he was 21 years old. So, 2025 minus 1989 plus 21. There you go.
Okay.
Look at you, little math savant.
You should be the bookkeeper.
Right?
We need one.
76 years old, and they have 15 more left. So they haven't gotten out of jail. I think it's in the hands of parole, and it doesn't necessarily sound like. So you're telling me they had good behavior. What about all those headlines that they weren't having good behavior?
I could tell you about their good behavior.
All right.
So they were reunited in 2018 after spending years in separate prisons.
Okay.
Since then, they've maintained a close relationship, supporting each other and engaging in various rehabilitative activities.
Okay.
Lyle earned a sociology degree, that's the older brother, and the younger brother, Eric, has been working with terminally ill inmates and participating in art programs.
Okay. How long have they been doing that?
I think a while.
Like how long? Like since they were reunited?
You know, no, I don't think so. But I mean, I don't actually have the dates of how long this is starting, and I'm sure that once they started getting wind of the fact that there was I don't doubt that their behavior shifted.
You can bet your ass.
Yeah.
If people are talking about me and they're like, maybe we should resentence Justin, I'd be like, you know, I would love to spend more time with our terminally ill inmates. I really feel like I have something I'd like to pray over them. You can bet your ass. I'd be like, I'd like to take some courses in being a pastor too. I would like to explore my more religious side. Interesting. You think it could all be a manipulation?
See, I lean towards the other side of this case in the first place. I think it's a timing thing. I think it was when they were tried. That is why. Like, to me, it makes sense that somebody who's abused, I mean, we all, whenever any rape victim comes forward, you always have the people in the back, like, why didn't they run? I know Nickelodeon just had this huge, we should talk about this. I didn't even think about that. But the Nickelodeon, when Drake Bell.
Full disclosure, I didn't know Nickelodeon
You
was
do,
still
your
around.
kids watched
No,
it.
I know what Nickelodeon is.
So did they watch Drake and Josh? You ever saw Drake and Josh?
No.
Drake Bell, huge. My first crush, also, let me put that out there, was Drake Bell. But he came out and they did this basically Nickelodeon documentary where all of our childhood stars came out about the abuse that they faced at the hands of Nickelodeon.
I have no doubt.
And Drake Bell was kind of like the big bombshell because he comes forward about how he was groomed and he tells a specific story. And I remember, talking to everybody about it, and I had so many people. Why didn't he just run away?
Well,
why didn't he just leave? He was old enough at the time. He was this, and I would remember being so shocked when they said that. But in this case, it's like when you start somebody so young on abuse, you can really shape their mind however you want them to.
Sure. Was the 21-year-old Lyle, was he still living at home?
He was not. He was all away at college, which is why when Eric confessed to him what was still going on, I think that's why it evoked such a response from Lyle, because he was not there to help him. He wanted to take him back, and the parents were like, no, you need to stay. So.
Gotcha. All right. Well, there you have it. I guess it's in the hands of the parole board. 76 years old with 15 more years left to go. No?
He's 56.
Oh, okay.
They're now 57 and 54 years old.
All right, 57, 54. So, okay.
70-something.
So they're 70 years old.
Yeah. But it reminds me of the JonBenet Ramsey, because we were talking about that new evidence that had just came up with JonBenet Ramsey, the new DNA evidence that was basically excluded the parents as being an option.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So here we have new evidence.
That's actually new evidence. I'm going to say something different. None of this sounds like new evidence to me.
That's what
this
this
isn't
81-page thing said.
This is just evidence that wasn't presented in the original trial. And, that's the role of the judge. So the jury is finding the fact, and the judge is going to decide which evidence gets to go. And he or she will make that determination based on the law, right? So So we're not just going to put anything we want in front of the jury. We're not going to taint the jury that way on both sides, right? So I don't know that is new evidence, but I guess they've already resentenced them, so obviously the court disagrees with me. They wouldn't do that if there wasn't new evidence.
I'm on the other end. I was all ready for them to get off. I was on that side, and then I read this 81-page response to the habeas corpus from the district attorney, and I was like, those are some valid points. All of his points that he's making, none of this evidence has anything to do with the mindset of them during the murders. How does it make a difference that he wrote this letter when he was 6 years old to the actual time they were sitting on the TV? They were sitting on the couch watching TV. Like there was no threat to their life. This whole 81 pages was them saying what you're saying right now, and somehow that judge still decided to resentence them.
Well, I think courts sometimes, when popular opinion is out there, I think they're also just as susceptible to that. And that's could be why he resentenced but didn't really, right? I mean, it's not much of a resentencing. All it did was give him an opportunity for parole.
It's hope.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Be curious to find out if the parole board that is when the conduct in prison is really going to come out, because that's what they're going to look at. Is this a rehabilitated, individual? And as you said, how do you rehabilitate somebody? You don't. Listen, if that were the case, we wouldn't have criminals in New Orleans going into prison and then back out and then back in again and then back out. It's very difficult to rehabilitate criminals, but in this instance, it's like an isolated crime. I mean, you're not going to rehabilitate a 70-year-old man. They're just going to say, all right, well, you're not in jail anymore, so good luck.
There are organizations, like another thing about the time we're in now. I mean, we're in a world that's shifting towards rehabilitation instead of punishment, or people that are advocating for that.
Right, we should be.
Yeah, that's definitely like kind of something that is a big factor here, is can they be rehabilitated at this age, and just what exactly does it mean?
Well, what does rehabilitation at that age for these crimes mean, right? So in our young population that we see here in New Orleans who go to jail, we want to rehabilitate these people, right? I have no interest in continuing to prosecute 20-year-old kids for petty crimes, and it does no good for the city. We don't have the tax revenue. Their children are now burdens of the state, and it's just and on and on and on and on and on. We have ruined New Orleans by imprisoning, or the greater New Orleans area, all South Louisiana, by imprisoning generations of men, and we're seeing the product of it. And while you're looking out your window saying, why, after generation of generation, can we not see any improvement? I would say it's probably because you continue to send all of the young men to prison and then ask yourself why. But in this instance, this is very different. So you've got, two people who spent their entire lives in prison for like one crime, or two, as the case may be. So what does rehabilitation look like?
I mean, do you think that because they killed, to me, I don't really see
how they
need
to society?
Well, see, I don't really.
Probably not.
For me, you killed your parent. Those were very specific people. You don't kill your parents unless you're just a psychopath.
Right.
Or there was a reason.
Right. But I think that the fact that you say that leads to this cultural shift where we're saying, well, if you murdered your parents, you obviously had a reason. It's getting dangerous being a parent these days.
I wouldn't say obviously.
Man, I'm scared to death of my kids. But
I mean, we just don't. It sucks that we don't know what really happened, and I also don't know. Do you think if they actually had some real good evidence, they found footage, because a lot of the alleged abuse didn't necessarily happen in their home, in the privacy of their home. It was in hotel rooms. The prosecution was questioning Eric, and they were like, did it happen this place? Yes. Or it was actually the defense. Did it happen this place? Yes. Did it happen this place? Yes. What if all of a sudden they got footage of this alleged abuse? Would that change anything? No, right? Because the whole claim is that's not self-defense, no matter even if they had a video.
I think you can accept all these facts as true and still have the same result.
Yeah.
So none of this to me is new evidence, as I said. I think it's probably true. I don't not believe them. I believe that they were probably abused as kids. And sometimes what we like to do is this little exercise here where, when I'm talking to the lawyers about a case, I'll be like, okay, fine. Let's accept all of that is true. Let's not quarrel over this. Now what? And I think if you do that in this case, you're going to get stuck on the decision, right? It's like, okay, I accept it as true. You'd been abused your entire life. Okay, where do we go from here? You can't just shoot your mother 15 times with a shotgun when you're not in danger. You know, you're not insane, right? We can't use that defense. Clearly, you know what you're doing. You're not in self-defense because you're not in no immediate danger. Mm-hmm. So you're in this other category, and I don't know what to do with those people. Are you telling me that a 20-year-old man or an 18-year-old man is being abused by his father, like sexually abused by his father? I mean, that's also weird.
That's probably why they don't ask for help, though, because they know, like, first of all, that like probably gets internalized, right? They're speaking about themselves that same way that other people are speaking about them, like, you know, how is this happening to me? Like, how is my dad? Like, it's gross. Like, how is this happening to me? And then you have okay, so now I'm going to go to the police. Now I'm going to go to the police and tell them and hope that they believe me. Would they have? I hope so. I trust the police. I mean, but, you know, a lot of people don't, and it's valid.
You didn't give them you didn't give a chance. You know, when we see the battered spouse thing, those are the instances where they always say, like, if I didn't get away, he was going to kill me. Right, so it's those true physical abuse.
That's what they're saying. They said that if they hadn't killed him, they would have killed him. They would have killed both of them.
Okay, and what's that based off of?
He said if he ever told anybody, I'll kill you.
Wow, that's not enough.
Right before the crime happened. It wasn't right before the crime happened.
I don't think that's enough.
Yeah.
That's not enough. When we look at it in abuse cases, we see she spent this night in the ER. She was back in the ER a week later. You know, then she spent a week in ICU getting beaten, you know, to a pulp.
There is actually one piece of medical evidence.
Okay.
I say evidence loosely. Let me just read it to you. In 1977, there was a medical record of Eric Menendez, and I told you I didn't want to talk about the gruesome stuff. I mean, not gruesome, but like the sexual stuff. But he was examined for a hurt posterior pharynx uvula.
Well, I'm not. Uvula in the throat. Yeah, it's uvula.
ULVA.
Uvula. It's a little dangly guy.
But it's
back
ULVA.
There.
Where does the EA come?
Ulva. I don't know. Look, they made me become a lawyer. Pharynx. I wasn't going to be a doctor.
It's his pharynx.
We get it.
Uvula.
We get what happened.
Soft palate.
Right.
And it could have been, you know.
Okay,
what
but
the
that's
cause
not
of it
enough.
is.
That's
okay.
not enough. So here,
that was one medical.
Justin Chopin. I've heard all the evidence. I've decided you're guilty. Okay, and maybe the abuse can play as a factor in your defense, but nothing more. It's not a bar. And I don't believe that if you hadn't killed them, they were going to kill you. There's nothing to suggest that. That's it. I've ruled, like.
Okay, I agree with your ruling. Last thing, because you just mentioned it and I forgot to bring it up. I was going to talk about how you can use the same evidence for multiple things, and the fact that they could have used this abuse as either, you know, like a defense, the self-defense, justifying their behavior in this case, but they didn't. They used it in the resentencing decision.
Yeah.
And I did think that was interesting, just how that played out, where it couldn't have. We just proved that there wasn't enough evidence for them to use it. But the way that evidence can be used for all different types of purposes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Look, I think it's a point of sympathy. So maybe we're not going to give you the death penalty. I know California doesn't do that, but I mean, you killed both your parents, premeditated. Mm-hmm. I understand one was an abuser and one was essentially an accomplice. I don't care about your toupee. You know, nobody cares about your damn toupee. You know, that's not a reason to kill somebody. Maybe it's my inner boomer. I'm a Gen X, man. So I'm of the other generation.
I think that's the point you made, that, like, we're not denying that they weren't abused either. Even if they were abused, even if this evidence is true and we believe everything, that I don't necessarily think the court the court did anything. Like, I read all 81 pages, and they made some good points as to why maybe it could have gone the other way.
Yeah, interesting. It would have been interesting to be in the first trial. That
it was on Court TV. You can go back and watch it.
I'll let you do that. And if you find anything really great, you let me know. So, all right. Well, hey, thanks for coming on the show.
Course.
Thanks for educating me on the Menendez brothers. I feel totally caught up now. I haven't missed a thing. And we're great. And next time you're going to tell me about the gypsy from Metairie, who is a Munchausen by proxy victim who got her boyfriend to stab her mother. Can't wait.
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today on Above the Legal Limit. If you enjoyed the show and you want to hear more about business and law, hit that subscribe button. If you didn't like the show, keep it to yourself. Remember, there's no limit to what we can achieve. We will see you next week. Until then, even though we're above the legal limit, let's drive safely. Cheers, everyone.